Welcome to the special edition of Dads, Why Do We Need Them? A program under the Fatherhood engagement that was sponsored by Monogram Loves Kids Food. This panel was assembled to have a discussion that will lead you to think more about how important fathers are to their children, to this community, and to the health and welfare of their children. Our panelists are all active members of this society and the community in which we live, and we believe they will lend some thoughts to you about not only their situations, but how you can improve your own. So the first question I'm going to ask our panel today is, what is a dad?
A dad is someone that provides guidance to children and help them become a productive citizen. He is the first person that should tell a daughter how a gentleman should treat her, and he teaches the son how to be a gentleman.
That's good. I think a dad is, and this is going to be kind of off the wall because I agree 100% with what Tonya said, but I also think it's good for a dad to show their sons and their daughters that it's okay to show feelings, to be emotional, that it's okay to cry, it's okay to be angry within limits and not go overboard, of course, and then it's okay to love on your family.
Well, I guess you're talking about dads and parents. Dad is the first male figure that I became familiar with in my life, and he set the standard, or set the bar. Actually taught me what it was to be a man. I was born a male, but he showed me there's a difference between being a male and being a man. A man is, the word's been already used, responsible, and he takes care of his family. He is, according to the Bible, the head, and he's a role model that I wanted to try to emulate.
Mirror pretty much what everybody else says, and I'm going to go to scripture. The Bible talks about whoever is to be great among you must first be your servant. I think when I think about dad, especially when Christ started talking about husbands, love your wives as Christ treated the church. What did Jesus Christ do for the church? He died for the church. And so when I see a father, when I see a dad is that first person who's supposed to get up in the morning and pray for his family. A dad is supposed to be the one to be that servant leader, to cook for the family, to pray for the family, to be there, to know what it means to serve, to be willing to die for his wife and his children. That dad is really that pivotal role of what it is to be faithful, a priest, a prophet for his home, and a provider for his home, and a protector for his home.
So now that we've discussed what it is to be a dad, because to me a dad can be anybody who steps in to that particular position with a child. It may be a grandparent, it may be an uncle, or it can be anybody who is responsible enough to teach the girls and boys in their families what it is to be part of a family and what it means to be ingrained in love for one another. Right. So I think a lot of times we miss that part of the discussion in how to keep other men engaged. So when you all were growing up, what was the first thing you remember about your childhood where men in your family were involved?
I think, well, I'll start first as everybody else is thinking. One of the things that really stood out with my dad and my uncles was they was hard workers. Each one of them. I mean, my dad, he had a shop, he had a car shop right above his house. He worked at Goodyear and he worked for the military. So, I mean, and all my uncles also had like 2 and 3 other jobs. So that first real thing that I learned to respect and pick up on was that hard work ethic.
Yeah.
That was something that just really stood out in my mind. And it wasn't just my dad, it was the other men, my uncles. They really stood out that they just went to bat for their family when it comes to work.
Yeah, I can co-sign that. My grandparents raised me, and my grandfather, he was a worker as well as my uncles. They, you had to work, you know, that was important. And education was also important, even though my grandfather only had an 8th grade school, went to school as far as 8th grade, but he believed in education. So, but work definitely was something that I can remember about him. He was always tinkering around. He used to be a barber. He was a good with televisions and radios, repairing stuff like that. And he loved gardening, but he was always doing something, always.
I have to agree. As with Tonya, I was raised by my grandparents, but my grandfather was a miner, coal miner. I'm from West Virginia. And he used to say all the time, hear my grandmother say, "You don't work, you don't eat." So now I say those same things. And then my dad was a railroad man in West Virginia, but I like to also add that my dad was an alcoholic. So that's something I also think about when my grandfather was a heavy drinker. I wouldn't say he was an alcoholic, but my dad was definitely a functioning alcoholic. So that stands out to me as far as the father in our life. I knew who he was, but he wasn't active in my life. And he was I always called him kind of like Otis. I lived in a small town called Bluefield, and everybody knew Lisa's dad, and he was a railroad man, but that if he was home off the railroad, he was drunk. Just to be real about it.
Right.
Well, my dad, again, he set the example. He had 3 jobs when he was 10 years old to help my grandmother. And I don't think he was a harder working man in America. He worked for the Togos that had the Coca-Cola bottling plant. He delivered drugs for the drugstore on a bicycle, and he worked at Dr. Holsinger's mother's tea room, whatever that was back then. So, you know, he always had a job. And, you know, also, you know, kind of not bragging, but Dad used to say everything is impossible until somebody does it. And he went to work at the post office when I was born. And he was the first black man to work for the post office here. And yeah, and then at the last job he had, he was a magistrate. He was the first black magistrate for the 21st Judicial District. And you know, Ann Hilton is now the chief magistrate, but she said my dad opened the door. And I like what he said. I think about it all the time. The people say, well, we can't do this, we can't do that. But that's just because nobody's tried. And he believed in putting forth effort. And I was a little bit on the lazy side myself, but he stayed out there. Yeah, he could inspire you. And when you think about it, everything is impossible until somebody does it.
That's right, that's good.
Once somebody does it, it's no longer impossible.
Exactly.
So,
I might steal it.
oh, he's a great man. He wouldn't mind you using it. So, yeah, Dad was my hero.
You know, my grandfather raised me, my mother's father, and I knew my dad, and he was around, but he too was a functioning alcoholic. And my dad had this trademark of starting at the end of our road where we lived at night and start singing. And he didn't need a microphone. You could hear him all the way across the road. So when we got on the bus in the morning, people go, "Heard your dad last night. He was really singing." And it would be embarrassing to me.
Right.
But my grandfather gave me the wisdom to move forward. You know, he taught me about the Bible. He taught me how to read and to write. And he would teach me about things that were happening in the world. He was an avid reader to only have completed the 3rd grade. So when I hear young fathers today say, "I can't do that, it's not for me," how do you know? I agree with your father. If you never try something, you'll never know what you can do.
Right.
And sometimes it means stepping farther out than keeping it to yourself. Tell somebody what you need help with. So knowing that we all came from families where working was important, right?
It was.
What's going on with the work ethic of today, where me and him are concerned, especially young fathers? What's going on with work ethic?
I think, interesting thing. I had the opportunity to go to Green Rock Prison in Chatham, and I also work at Boys and Girls Club in Danville. The thing that really stood out in my mind after I went to go talk to those guys, number one, when I asked all the guys to raise their hand about who had fathers in their lives, probably 80% of them raised their hand and said no, they didn't. But what really stood out in my mind after I talked to them, went and got lunch there at Green Rock and talked to one of the counselors who asked me to come. And she said, we asked them to do certain things. And every time we asked them to do something, they ask, what am I getting out of it? And I'm like, wait a minute, you're in prison. But what stood out in my mind, that same entitlement mindset is the same entitlement mindset that's in our youth right now. So even when I'm asking youth at Boys and Girls Club, you know, we do positive incentives. There's nothing wrong with positive reinforcement when you do something good. But when it's every single time, hey, I need you to take out the trash. The trash that you made, I need you to take out the trash. All right, what am I getting out of it?
Right.
It's that same, and it's not you do work because I told you to do. You know, baby boomer generation, I remember you guys do what I say because I said do it.
Right.
That's what I grew up with. I grew up with somebody saying, you're not getting none out of it. You lucky you living in my house. That's what you're getting out of it.
Exactly.
But now it's, I have to give you something for doing what you're supposed to be doing in the first place. And it's not teaching responsibility. But that's one thing that's really stood out in my mind that I've seen with this younger generation coming up. And that's not to demonize them. It's just a different mindset that I've seen from the baby boomer
like they're
generation. Right. Yeah.
Right.
I agree with you. And, I mean, I grew up the same way. You know, you do what your parents say do. No questions asked. I was hard-headed. I was the only child who had to ask why, but I still knew I had to do it. I wasn't expecting anything, but I wanted to know why. But I raised my two sons. Going back to when you said that you can't do something, that wasn't even allowed in my household. Don't say that word. You can do something. You can do whatever you want to do. So it's just like the structure is gone, and everybody is and give me. You owe me this. I don't have to do nothing until you do something for me, you know. And it's just, I think it's because it's like babies having babies, no more grandmas. It's just the structure is just it has fallen away.
And I think that's Tonya and I, that's what we kind of do for a living. We try to help individuals get jobs who've been through some difficult times in life. You know, a lot of the individuals we work with, they've had prior substance abuse issues, they've been incarcerated. And, you know, a part of me, and please don't get me wrong when I talk about our social service system. I'm not talking about social services, but just our system where you can get housing. You can get help for housing, you get help for food, you can get help for transportation. You can almost get help for anything. And believe me, I know it is needed. But I think at some point we have to either, you know, cut it off at a certain point or make it not as easy, because since I've been a probation officer, and now I've also worked at Piedmont Community Services, and I've actually had people quit a job because of their food stamps being cut off, or because they're no longer going to get housing assistance. And I'm thinking, this is what you're supposed to, that's what's supposed to happen. Right. But in their mentality that they're being punished for working. And please don't get me wrong that I don't think people should be helped, because I know what it's like to need help. I'm just saying at some point limits or something has to be put in place where it's not just a handout all the time, or appears to be a handout, if I can say it that way.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I see is that the whole family structure, like you were talking about, Tonya, has really, it's on the decline. you know, if it was forever that you had a support system because your family lived close together. You know, if a child got sick, you had other people in the family that could help take care of it. If the fathers needed help, they could go to one another, and maybe one had planted a garden, you know, maybe one had meats, pigs, especially during the winter. Anybody can get, you know, get that. But
tobacco.
Right, but we were working together as a unit, and the man at that time, to me, was the leader. He was the leader of the family. And I know, women, you're going to get mad about this, so calm your nerves, because you have a role to play. But we've lost that strength and leadership that we once had, and now we don't know where the leadership is coming from.
True.
And mothers are bearing the brunt. You're feeding them, you're clothing them, you're taking care of them, you're leaving your jobs, you're rushing them to the doctor, and you need help. So part of this discussion is to show men that they can do better and be better. You don't have to be rich to be a dad.
No, you don't.
And so I think that's one of the dynamics that has changed over the years. I read the statistic that said 23 million children in the U.S. go to bed without their biological father being at home. That's a lot of children, right? So how do we incorporate men into the lives of their children? How do we begin that process?
Wow.
You know, I was doing a little research before I came up, because this is an important show. 2013 CDC report came out, and it really blew my mind when I read this, because TV and everybody else would say it's different, but the CDC reported, 2013 report came out and said African American male fathers are the most involved in their children's lives. And you would think the way society would tell you is totally different. And that's not to go against any other racial demographic. It was just interesting to me that those numbers came out and said that African American males are most involved in their children's lives. I think one of the things that is so important to be in your child's life, especially, I'll never forget this. When my mom told me I could do something, it was, my mom loves me, she'll always be there. She has to say this. When my dad said I could do something, I could run through a wall when my dad said, I know you can do something. Because it's not that my dad is not one of those people that just always congratulate, it's just that he doesn't say a lot. So when he does say something, it's even more important to be quiet and listen to what he's saying. So if my dad told me I could knock down this wall, I would feel like I could really run through this wall. And so I think that's one of the most important things when a male is in a child's life and being a positive influence, is that that child has a self-esteem, a self-confidence that only a man can give a child, especially when it comes to another male telling another male. I remember the first time I heard the N-word. You know, my mom was loving and I'm sorry and this happened, but only my dad could tell me really how to handle that in a positive way and don't worry about what people are saying to you. Only my dad could tell me, I've heard this too, and you're probably going to hear it again, Chad, but this is how you handle this situation. So, I mean, just having a father there, that male influence, was pivotal for me.
I'm like Chad, my dad was the man. But, you know, to kind of give a little thought to the question, I think that, yeah, the male is the leader, the alpha. But, and I know this is about dads, but I want to shoot a little something about mothers. I was born October 2nd, 1952 at Community Hospital. And when I showed up, I didn't know where I was. I didn't know who I was. I knew nothing. And my mother and father took me home. And you see, the results now. I'm a little bit like Abraham Lincoln. I'm not much, but whatever I am, I hope to be, I owe it all to my mother. And the reason I want to mention mothers is because, until I went to Albert Harris, first grade, Mama had me all day, every day. And they tell me I was true to my name, Dennis. They said that, I think said the comic strip started in 1951, and so a year before I showed up. But my mother said if it had been the other way around, they'd had to pay her, so I was a man. And, you know, everybody should recognize that even when you talk about single family households, the mother is the first teacher you'll have before you ever see the inside of a classroom.
So true.
So I think part of the solution depends on mothers to somehow instill these qualities that make a responsible, productive person. You know, teach them about personal responsibility, teach them about the work ethic, basically all the things that you need to make it in life. And that's one of the things, you know, my mother and father both, when I went in the military, before I left, they called me to the side because Dad did all the talking, but Mom was there backing him up. And he made a statement. He said that everything that your mother and I ever tried to teach you, everything we ever told you, you don't have to pay it any mind. You don't have to do anything we said. And my mouth dropped over. He said, all you have to do is keep on living, and you'll find out. So the last 46 years has taught me, or more or less validated all those things that they taught or tried to teach me. That was a little hard-headed too. But you know, I guess what I'm trying to say is this: your mother's your first teacher to teach children what they need to become responsible males and females. It begins at home. And so the emphasis should be on education. You know, that is the cornerstone.
Right.
But once we get a few of those lessons in the household across to those children, they may be like the prodigal. They might get out there and cut a flip or two. But at some point, it will click. And that was the greatest thing that my dad ever did for me, is that once I became what you might consider a productive, responsible citizen, he called me to the side and he said, your mother and I knew that one day that you would come to yourself, and just want to let you know that we never gave up on you and that we're proud of you. And I've been okay ever since. You know, once you, I guess, achieve that feedback from your parents that they accept you as an adult and respect you, and of course you know all the time they love you, but once you get that, you don't need anything else.
That's right. They respect you. Exactly right.
Package wrapped up.
While I was raising my boys, my husband was a truck driver, so he wasn't home. So I've had to play the role of mother and father, and but I could use him when I wanted to discipline kids, because I would say, I'm gonna tell you.
Wait till your dad
Right.
gets home.
Yeah. So that, you know, it's like they would listen to me to a point. And then after that, I would have to say, well, I'm gonna tell your daddy, or he's gonna know about this, and then they would straighten up, you know.
Right.
So that having that, instilling in the kid the respect and the having the role model, the awe of knowing that daddy, you know, he's a man. So
He's a man.
yeah.
And that's what I've had to do. You know, Tonya calls me, says I have a man personality all the time. I'm kind of forceful, in your face, aggressive kind of a person. And I'm even like that in my household. And I went through a health challenge last year, so my husband really stepped up, and he became father and mother to our children, because I wasn't able to do that for the most of last year, and I get a little bit emotional. But that's when I know my son got to see his dad be a man, not just be dad, because he had to cook for our children, he had to clean, mom couldn't even walk. They had to see my husband carry me to the bathroom and take care of me. And my son got to witness all of that. And then my daughter, it was important for her to see my husband, because he's a 6'5", I call him the Rock all the time, and she got to see that vulnerable part of her father. So I think as women, we have to also learn to allow our husbands or partners or whatever, let them be the man. Let them be the dad, because I can honestly say, I don't know in the past if I had let my husband really be the man of the household, because I was controlling, I was taking care of stuff, getting it done. Not anymore, because thankfully my health challenge did some changing in Lisa, so my husband is the head of the household, and I let him lead, and it's been wonderful for me and for my children.
I think one of the things when you talk about single parent households is that you don't have to look like every other single parent household, right?
Yeah.
My daughter's father wasn't one of the most bravest men, but yet he was to her, because she saw him for years. We didn't know he was blind. This man had a full-time job at Hookers, would work on inventory, counting it up in his head. And I always tell her I had the English skills, he had the math skills, so she turned out well. And so, but bringing him into the home and saying, you know, he would take her even when she was a baby and spend time with her. And he was a good dad to the point that he knew how to be a dad because he never had a role model. But together we formed a family. We went out to dinner, we would do things together. And I think that's what's important. Let's stop using our babies as pawns in our disputes. They are our children, and we should be working for their welfare. I also, in one of the statistics you all probably read, and it was true in the survey that we did here about what was some of the barriers for fathers. And one of the ones that you all mentioned already is education. The other was transportation.
Yeah.
And how do you think we can help them with that? I know you guys work with that quite a bit. So what are some of the things that can be done to help fathers with transportation that don't have it?
Depends on where they live. I mean, unfortunately, you know, Bassett and Axton are, we like to say, the transportation handicap areas for our community. We have the radar bus, but thankfully now it goes to a portion of Ridgeway, but it still doesn't hit Bassett and Axton. Another thing, you know, I shouldn't get on this soapbox, and Mandy, please don't kill me, but, you know, I think even the locations that the radar bus goes in Martinsville, I think it could, I really wish it could be changed a little bit. Whoever came up with those routes, and maybe you know Mr. Martin who came up with them, but some of them don't make quite sense to me. I used the example like on Starling Avenue. There should be a bus stop there instead of at the museum. The people that we work with, who are the individuals who would ride the bus, they're not going to the museum. We have 3 houses. Piedmont has 3 houses on Starling Avenue. DMV would be a wonderful stop, because the people who we are saying who are transportation handicapped, they need to go to DMV because most of them need to get an ID or a driver's license at some point during the process. They told me Lowe's is an exchange for Walmart. Well, I don't understand that language, but most of the people we work with, they don't need to go to Lowe's.
No, but they need to go to Walmart.
But Walmart is definitely a location that they need to go to. So I think the people who make these decisions in our community regarding our transportation needs need to keep in mind, don't look at what we do, but look at what's the benefit to the people that this radar bus really serves.
Exactly.
So I think that would be a really big help. And then I know Mandy's always looking for different grant opportunities, and if you get the opportunity to speak with her and talk with her about the people that you serve, like right now she's working her reentry grant. Reentry is working with individuals who have been incarcerated and coming out just to help them get back and forth to employment. Right now, our budget at Community Recovery Program, the biggest part of our budget goes to help people get back and forth to work, because we don't want people to miss those opportunities. So that's my little soapbox. Thanks for giving an opportunity.
You did a fine job.
Oh yeah, you really did, and it made me start thinking. Even when we did that, the Bridges Out of Poverty conversation, what ends up happening is we have these meetings, we have these conversations about helping those people, and then don't even have those people in the room.
Right.
So how am I going to really understand? I mean, you made a beautiful point right there that just opened my mind up. Like, when people, especially when people get out of jail, they need their IDs to get a job. They need a ride to get to the job. Especially if I'm just coming out of prison and I need these resources, how am I going to get to these resources? And so even somebody who's just coming out of poverty, just coming out of prison, is not going to do home improvement.
Right.
They're going to Walmart to eat.
Right.
So you just made a really, really great point, and I'm glad you said that, because I'm going to take that back to the city. I'm so glad you said that. And not only me taking it back to the city, but we need to have some individuals that you serve to come and actually talk to the people that are actually making the bus routes, so they can understand what it actually would be more beneficial.
And another thing, I encountered this with a couple of people that we had to go to court with, where the custody of their children were concerned. And I remember them coming to court, and they walked, and they lived on Clearview. And I said to them, there's a bus at Clearview. You could have taken the bus to the courthouse, and it would have taken you back. And they said, we didn't know about the bus because they're re-entering. We don't have and you all do a great job, but there's a step missing to educate them about what's available to them before they come out. A lot of these men are fathers, have children they haven't seen in a while, and they're confronting these type issues. And then we're saying on top of that, go love on your child, which may also be a transportation issue. So what are you thinking, Dennis, about all this?
I think she covered a lot of it. But one thing is, I don't know what you call that position, ombudsman, somebody that actually points people in the direction of all the resources that are available. I don't know whether we have one, but because we do have a lot of resources for a small area. We really do. But as you said, it's sort of like that old saying when I was a child growing up, people used to say, what you don't know won't hurt you. That's a lie.
That's true.
You know, it's the fact that people don't know what's available that causes complications. So again, go back to education. If we have people that make it known to people the resources that are available for their particular set of problems or their particular situation, then I think we'll have better efficiency and better results too.
You know, too, Mabel, that speaks to the old saying, necessity is the mother of invention. You know, that's a business right there, creation, because you guys are not the first ones that have said about transport. That has been an issue in this area for a while. It's transportation. The hospital just came out with an issue about people needing rides from the hospital. You know, they couldn't give up their beds because people needed a ride from the hospital to their home. You know, for anybody listening out there, transportation is a big job. Any entrepreneurs out there listening, that is a big job creation right there. It's just simply drop, right. It's a big gap. So, I mean, if you can get some rental cars going, you know, I just saw where the, I just saw where the Danville, one of our city council people in Danville, Lee Vogler, shout out to Lee, but he just called Lyft. Lyft is similar to Uber. It's just another one. And he got Lyft to come to Danville, the service, the app. So, I mean, you know, that might be a situation. I was thinking about that, to actually call Lyft myself. And so it's a situation just like Uber, to where the service comes into the area, but you use your own car to pick people up, and it's all, and you get paid for doing that. So it sounds like that's something that needs to happen.
That's definitely
Yeah, it is needed. And, you know, I think of Bassett and Axton, like Southside Virginia, and I'm not being political, just being truthful. If you cut the state in the middle and you look from Lynchburg all the way out to Eastern Shore, it looks a whole lot different than when you come back this way and Southwest and go all the way out to Bland County and some of those others. That's how Axton and Bassett looks to us when we were trying to do services. You know, I went to a party at Bassett to do a home visit and thought I was in Patrick County. and I was still in Bassett,
Bassett.
right?
Yeah.
So as I was driving, I was thinking, if you take a person way out here who wants to go to work and wants to support their children, they can't because there's no way out. And so we've got to find some way to navigate that. I think what you were saying is probably true. And I remember at one point in this community where we had this community meeting of doing a wraparound service
Right.
Yeah.
that is still on somebody's table.
Right.
We
Yeah,
had
still
a
there.
plan.
Yeah.
Remember, Chad?
Yeah.
We did
Yeah.
all this work, had a plan, had a pilot program set up on how to involve these children and the family members, the moms and the dads, and bring them into Alvin Harris and then build from there.
Oh.
And then we had identified a school in the county, we would try that. And it just got dropped. So until we as a community can actually look at ourselves and say, we need to make these changes to make it better. So let me ask you this. Most fathers think to be a good dad, all they have to do is pay child support. What is your thought on that?
They need to rethink that.
Okay.
Because, I mean, money is fine, but the child needs love and attention. You have to nurture the child and show. You can't teach them anything with money. You're just teaching them that that's something they want to get. But it's you teach them no values, no morals, no. Show them how to, like she said, open up and show your emotions. It's okay. Teach your little girl how, again, I think I said it when we first started talking, teach your little girl how a guy should treat you. No man has the right to put their hands on you. Nobody has the right to talk to you any kind of way. So your daddy would be the person that she should learn that from. And values, knowing what's right and wrong to do, and respecting people and loving people, you have to have somebody to teach you that. And you can't get taught that if you just things about the money.
Just money.
Child support. The child support is just for your clothing and the food and stuff. And still, it's not enough for that. But what you got to do, if somebody loved you or loved them, the father, so you need to think the same way about your own children. And shouldn't think, well, she gonna get the money. They always thinking that the woman gonna get the money, but it's just a drop in the bucket. The woman's
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's not. It's not enough.
If you look at the average household based on what I see coming through our office, average rent is around $400, right? If you give him $150 for your child, that's only going to supplement so much. She still has to provide for all the
Right.
other things that causes a household to function.
Yeah.
So we've got to turn that thought around that it's money for her. It's not. Even if it did go to rent, it's for that child.
Right.
Because the child
Yeah.
still needs a place to stay. What are some of your thoughts along those lines?
Well, one thing, you know, you're right. It just provides a portion. It's not the total picture, but I think Tonya touched on it. You know, she talked about something more than money. I remember Mr. Wilder Draper when we were kids. He said money ain't a substitute for a lot of things in life.
Right.
And it just occurred to me that I've been very blessed in my life. You know, with no situation where I was a single parent. Also, I had both parents. They were upstanding role models. But something I discovered in the years that I was putting together connecting those dots that my dad created for me when I left going to the military, he had, I like to call it a moral compass. And I was involved, a charter member of Old Dominion Search and Rescue, and we went up to Hungry Mother State Park up in Marion, Virginia for some training, FTM training. And I never, outside of military, never given a lot of thought to a compass, but that compass, sometimes you watch that needle and it's wavering, and then and that's what my dad provided, that moral compass. Yes, he provided food, clothing, and shelter, and he loved us, but he provided the one thing. I'm not saying a lot of people lack, but a lack of having that leadership, that moral compass, and having it instilled in the children is what separates a lot of people from success and failure. And that is one thing that I emphasize is you have to have a moral compass. And your compass might not exactly line up with mine, but if you don't have one at all, you lost.
Yes.
You are lost. So I wanted to bring that out. That's the one thing that I admire most about my dad. He did have a moral compass. And you know, we talk about African American males in America, at least 50% of them have been to jail or prison. And my dad was born in 1920. And it was, you know, and when he came along, it was pretty rough. But he never set foot in a jail or prison, you know. So I had a lot of good things that I could look to him. And but most of all, it was that moral compass. And you mentioned watching your husband perform some of the functions of being a man. The one thing I remember, my mother spent 62 years in service at Fair Street Christian Church, but my dad, the one thing you could count on him is just like you get up in the morning and brush your teeth or whatever. He was a praying man. He was connected with God. That's how his moral compass lined up with his Creator. And it was just passed along. So I guess probably to break that cycle and to create a new paradigm, we have to start attempting to instill in children that we have some influence over, even if they're not our own. You know, my little personal motto today is you have to want the same thing for other people you want for yourself. You know, it's kind of a little paraphrasing of the greatest commandment. And once we start practicing that, become involved, that's the key too. Become involved. It's one thing for me to sit at home and philosophize and come up with all these profound thoughts, but they do nobody any good if I just keep them right there in the household.
Exactly.
You have to put feet on them. You have to put them into action. And I'm going to shut it down.
Good stuff.
I think one of the, and pretty much everybody said it, I heard a quote once that said, to educate a child in mind and not in morals is to educate a menace to society.
Yeah.
To give a child a check, what you're telling me is that money is the only thing that really matters. And you're creating a normal that is not normal. And the scary thing for me is what I see. I remember at Shaw, and I was telling you this earlier, there was a few guys talking about, Dad, I'm broke, I'm in college, what am I going to get my dad for Father's Day? And we saw the gentleman sitting up to the right of us, and he was kind of quiet. I was like, why are you so quiet, man? He was like, I don't know what that's like. I was like, what are you talking about, being broke? I was like, well, I'm broke, what are you talking about? He was like, no, I've never known what it's like to have a father. And everybody just got real quiet. Because that's the first time, coming out of Martinsville, you know, kind of sheltered a little bit. But when he said that, it opened my mind up to, wow, like, there's some things that I've never even considered to even have to deal with because my dad was always there. And there's some things, I mean, you talked about it. Like, my mom could say, Chad, stop doing this, Chad, stop doing that. To a certain point, all right, I'm going to listen. But to a certain point, like, I can get over on her. But then when she said, wait till your dad comes, I'm sorry. Because I knew when Dad came home, like, there was no playing around. When I say, like, I was to the point to where my dad could just give you the look. But to have that father role, and that needs to become a new normal, is to have that male there. Like, child support is just that, support, not meeting the child's needs.
Right.
At all. I said it in college, and I made a girl really, really mad when I said it, but come to find out she was actually dealing with it. I said, you know, fathers really need to be there because, number one, they give us the self-esteem and really what a man is, but then two, they show women, like you said, you know, what is positive love. Because I said women sometimes end up getting older men to replace that father, and like she totally flipped out. And then come to find out later when I saw who her boyfriend was, he was 30 years older than her, because sometimes I think females are looking for that father love that they never got when they was a child. So I mean,
I don't think it has to necessarily be with an older man. I think it just be men
just
in
that
general.
role, right,
Yeah.
right. And so, if the dad doesn't want to take the responsibility, some mentor, some male figure that's positive that needs to step in and be that male role model for the children and the family.
I remember Creed Taylor telling me that he didn't want another man teaching his daughter how she should be treated. So he opened her doors. He took her to restaurants. He treated her the way he would want anybody she met to treat her. So she would know what to look for. And I think that would be an improvement, because statistics show the more involved a man is in the life of a young lady, the less likely she is to be a teen mother. So when we think about all of that, I want to put something out. Because I said to a young man recently, a child should know who the father is. And he was saying, well, if I do, I got to pay child support, I got to do this. I said, forget that. There's another angle we don't talk about, which is health. If I don't know who my father is, I may have things that happen to me that his medical history would have predicted for me. And here I am trying to figure out who my father is so I can understand what happened with them, so I'll know what's happening with me. But we don't talk about the medical side of the male involvement in a child's life.
And two, if the male is not in the child's life and he has a daughter by another woman, and the male son and then stepdaughter meet, if they don't know, and let's be real, Martinsville, Henry County, we're not a big community. So somewhere along the line, you are going to meet somebody that, you look in the phone book, 4 pages of Hairston, 3 pages of Martins. I have to be very careful about who I even talk to. But yeah, it's deep. It's real deep.
It is.
Yeah.
But I just want to throw that out there, because I think we all forget that growing up, the things that I might be predisposed to, I'll know to look for if I have that history. But if I don't and it hits me, I'm going to start blaming myself for not being able to consistently provide good health care in areas I didn't even know I need.
Right.
Okay?
As opposed to being preventative care.
So they said what you don't know won't hurt you.
It really will.
One of the biggest lies ever told.
It's a big lie.
It is.
Can I ask a question, Mable, if I may?
Yeah.
Okay. It's because you, ladies and gentlemen, are the baby boomer generation. Something I have seen. My dad talks about it. He talks about, and he came off the farm, which my mom did too. He said when crop came in, the whole community came together. When he got in trouble at school, he got whooped at school. Aunts and uncles whooped him. Then when he got home, he got whooped. What happened? Because I think, all right, so he came out the way he did because he had all this structure around him and support around him.
Right.
Where did we lose it?
I think we lost it when we started moving out. Right. Like you had aunts and uncles and grandparents and cousins, and they were all taking care of each other's children. So you had a total structure. And as time went on and you moved away, you didn't have that structure. You learned how to deal with these things on your own, or you created a new normal. I think that too has caused problems. I'm not saying you got to live next door to me, but we need to be in relationship enough so that we can help rear children. I remember getting angry one day because my mother said, watch the biscuits and don't let them burn. Okay, this is a true story. And I'm watching the biscuits and I'm going, they're getting brown and brown and brown. So I said, Mom, we're going to burn the biscuits. And she came in and she said, I didn't say that. I said for you to watch them and don't let them burn. All you had to say is they're brown. Well, my feelings were hurt, right? Because I thought I had done what was expected. So I went out in the neighborhood. I was going to my aunt's house. We had this little bully. And he walked up on me that day and he called me a name. my initials weren't supposed to be used for. And I introduced him to Mable. And when I got to my aunt's house, she said, "What happened? You don't ever act like this. What's going on?" And I explained it to her. She said, "That's not how you're going to handle this." And she told me why. She said, "I'm telling your mother about this." Now I got to march all the way back home, right, to be corrected by mom when my aunt has already corrected me. But in my mind, as a child, you're thinking as a child, this is a way to put him in his place. And so I did that. But I also had all this community support that says, this is not you. This is not how you're supposed to act.
There you go.
And we're not going to tolerate it. So let's make some adjustments. Now, I didn't quite like the adjustment I got, but we made adjustments. The other thing, too, is people are I'm going to whoop you when I get home. I'm going to beat you within an inch of your life. Okay, so you do that, but you don't give instruction.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
I always believe you give instruction, because once I give you instruction, you know what to do. And in this case, a lot of times we don't give instructions. We say, do it because I said so. That's not instructing me, because some point in my life, I might not like what you said.
Exactly.
Right? But if you instruct me as to why, then you can deal with that. And I think children are smarter than we give them credit for.
I agree with you, because again, it goes back to kids having kids. Nobody has really showed them how to do it. Right? And back to the village, you know, everybody in the neighborhood, it wasn't just your family. The neighbors would let you, because Miss Irie and Miss Lottie would tell, well, my grandma what was going on. If they knew anything, you had there was a whole village that would step in and say something, and then they didn't have to worry about my granny, Ma, saying anything to them. She'd just say, "I'm glad you did. Now I'm gonna get you too." Right. You know, it's like no, everybody is kind of tiptoeing. You can't say anything to anybody because everybody ready to shoot you now.
Right.
You know, or lay you out. They don't want to take it and accept that. I'm glad you did it. I'm glad you said something to them.
That you cared enough to say something. Right.
Well, now, you said something there that you cared enough to. You know, maybe that's part of that decline in society. People don't care anymore about anybody other than themselves. And I think that's the other thing that my dad, well, both of them played a role, but Dad more so than my mom, getting me out of that selfish mode to actually think about other people. And I do it religiously now. You know, even I remember when my mother passed away, I went over to the hospital to see her, and she was in intensive care. And there was a guy that walked back with us, and he went straight ahead, and I turned left, and I heard him when he walked in, he said, "Mama." And it dawned on me, somebody else got a mother in here, not just me. And not just in that one hospital, but all over the world. And everybody loves their mother. You know, but I think people are pretty much too self-centered now.
Yeah, that's definitely that.
And I'm a great thinker, but I don't have a solution to that. But I do know that it's something that needs an adjustment in society, where people do show that care, concern for others that they used to. You know, because my mother grew up on a farm in Walnut Cove, North Carolina, one of 11 children. And they were poor. You know, not P.O. poor, but poor. You know? And, you know, whenever you had, whatever happened, you know, whether it be somebody, I know you heard about it, somebody's barn burned down, everybody came together and helped them build, you know, rebuild. So, it's different now.
It is different.
And I think a lot of things that have changed you know, change is good. You know, life is like that. You have to keep moving forward. But in the process of change, about half the things that changed are for the better, and the other half probably should have stayed the same. And the one last thing I want to say is that a friend of mine was doing some substitute teaching a few years ago, and he noticed the children and he didn't ask what kind of household you come from, single, whatever. He just noticed that they were rude and obnoxious and just belligerent. So he's a little bit older than me, so he grew up at a time when you heard people say, you know, that you catch more flies with honey than you can with vinegar. In other words, if you act nice, you might get what you want. So he figured he'd give him a little cheap lesson and said, well, you know, when you're dealing with adults, administrators, and other older people, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, please, and thank you. You know what he said those kids did? He said they laughed at him and said, oh, Mr. Jones, you old-fashioned. You know, but old-fashioned is what got us where we are. And I don't think that new fashion, I could be wrong, but I don't think it's going to last very long.
Right.
No, either.
Right.
And that's the hope that I have for the generations coming along, that they won't go too far in the woods and get lost before they find their way back.
Mabel, you had mentioned instruction, and I keep saying that, you know, the kids having kids and they don't know anything, not learning anything. But we offer different things. So it's strengthening families through Piedmont is being offered, but people won't even bother to go out to get the instruction, how to be a parent.
And I used to teach that, and it was hard to get people.
And you feeding them.
And we provide a meal,
Yeah, you got somewhere for the kids to play, and it's a good thing. If you don't know how to do it, go learn how to do it. I mean, you know, just because I sometimes and getting back to where, you know, people are not wanting to be involved, and don't want to say anything. I'm crazy because I will get involved. I'll say something and mama will cuss me out, but it burns me up when you see a mother cussing at a child. A child cursing at a child versus talking to the child.
Right.
You know, but pulling on the arm, and it's like it's the child's fault, and the child is confused. You the one have the problem. Go somewhere and get some help so you'll know how to do it. Because talking to them like that, but then again, that's the way they were probably raised.
Exactly.
It's a cycle. But that's why we're having this conversation. We need to just stop that cycle. We need to figure out a way to help men take care of the kids or want to be in the kids' lives. And mothers need to stop hindering them when they want to be in the kids' lives. Don't make it difficult for them because they don't have the money. It's not all about the money. The child needs the father so he can learn from him and have a relationship with him. I don't know, they're on a tangent, sorry.
That's what, you know what? One of the things that's so important for us to do as a community is stop apologizing where we're trying to help. Too often we apologize when we tell the truth about a matter. And I think the stronger the voice becomes that says, this is an issue, we need to confront it, whether it's drugs and alcohol, whether it's human trafficking, whether it's fatherhood and families and children, maltreatment of children. We need to talk about it and find solutions. And maybe sometimes when we get to the point we have a solution, find a way to make it work. I want to go back to something that was said. Chet, you were talking about an entrepreneur doing some transportation. I want to tell you all a story as we begin to close. We had a gentleman in our neighborhood. His name was Raymond Lee Staples. Mr. Staples decided, I need to do something. People need to get to work. They need to pay their bills. So he bought a bus. And he would get up and start collecting people that worked up at Bassett and getting them to work, and even those who worked at Fieldcrest. And he worked himself, okay? Then on Saturday, he would bring the bus out. If you need to come into Martinsville, which was then a place to be, and pay your bills and get your groceries, you didn't have to worry about transportation because he was there to take you. He was the builder of our church. He was one of the founding members of our church. I look at this man. He wasn't the most educated man, but he was intelligent in ways I can't even comprehend. So I want to encourage our audience today to think about, what can I do to make a difference in a child's life? If I have a man who wants to help raise my child, and he's the father, will I let him? And if I'm a father, will will I continue to do the things I've done all along, simply because I don't think I can do anything else? I want us to think about that and change that narrative. I want to thank our guests today, Tonya Ingram, Lisa Smith, Dennis Hairston, and Chad Martin, for being here and having this conversation. I want you to know this is not just an African American issue. It is a societal issue. Thank you for joining us.